And we are live. What's up, wrestling fans? I'm Doug.
And I'm Kevin.
This is the Two Bros Wrestling Show. This is our Double or Nothing AEW's 2020 W.
How
Let me
many
try.
W's you got in there?
As many as it takes to get through this wrestling show, brother. This is our AEW 2020 Double or Nothing edition. There we
There
go.
you go.
I got it. But first, as always, let's hit that opening bell first. There we go. Kevin, what's in the news this week, brother?
Well, it's a tough. It is a tough week in the world of professional
Indeed,
wrestling.
it was. My goodness.
Yeah. Before we get to the fun stuff, the scripted stuff, real life in the wrestling community this week was nothing but sad news. I guess we'll just do it in chronological order. But we had two deaths this week, premature. Way too young, but first and probably most well known in this country at least was Shad Gaspar. And if you were a wrestling fan in the early, well, I guess like the 2006 to 2000,
sure.
10 frame, he was half of the tag team known as Crime Time in WWE. But Shad was 39 years old, and the beaches in California had just opened back up to visitors, and he was with his 10-year-old, and they were swimming, got caught up in a riptide. And what's the heartbreaking part of this story is not only did this happen in front of his son, fortunately his son was saved, and it was obviously a father's love there, because when the choice was made and the lifeguards were out there, he was very adamant from those that were standing by that save my son, and everyone's attention went to the boy, and Shad got pulled under, and then a couple of days later, the body was found after a couple of days of fruitless searching. So, tragic all the way around. But our thoughts are definitely with the friends of Shad, as well as to that family, which the wife and kids. Obviously in death, people come out and say nice things, but there's not anyone that has anything bad to say about him. And apparently he was just looking through his social accounts, an extremely proud father and family man. So very sad. And Doug, we have another death too. Unfortunately, it was not the only death of the week. And I know that we're schooling me a little more on this one, and you're very much more in tune, I think, with the Japanese world of professional wrestling. But if you wanted to,
sure, I'll jump in and talk about Hannah.
Yeah.
Hannah Kimura was a Japanese wrestler. She was only 22 years old. She died this weekend. By all accounts, it seems like the girl had too much of this life and too much cyberbullying. There's been no official cause of death released at this point. All the outlets are just reporting that she has passed away, but a lot indicates that she did take her own life. There's social media posts that were pulled up beforehand. Just as early as Friday, talking about, in her own words, she says goodbye. Another post says, "I love you, live long, I'm happy, I'm sorry." And apparently, from some other sources that I found, it looks like she was due to a show that she was on. It's actually a Netflix show. When we were talking about this last night, I was a little bit wrong about that, but it's a Netflix show called Terrace House Tokyo. And apparently, I was watching a bit of Wrestle Talk where they were talking about this. She was on one of the shows. From what I can gather, it's kind of like a Big Brother or Real World. If you're old enough to remember the Real World, I'm not sure if it's still a thing on MTV. But back when MTV played videos, they also had a few like reality shows, and this was one of them where they get a bunch of young people and they live in a house together. But Hannah Kimura was a female wrestler who had actually been in Wrestle Kingdom this year, the 2014 or the Wrestle Kingdom 14, and this is the first time any female stars had been in Wrestle Kingdom. On the show, one of her housemates, terrace mates, whatever, had accidentally shrunken her Japanese her wrestling gear, and this ended up with her slapping this person. Whether that was scripted or not, I don't know. I've never seen the show, but anyway, she received a lot of hate since that. She went from a fan favorite on the show to not being liked very well because of that, and apparently things just deteriorated in her personal life from hundreds and hundreds of negative comments on her across her social media, and was she apparently fell victim to cyberbullying and just had enough of this life. So it's just some pretty heavy news there, and I hate to have to report this girl was only 22 years old and
22.
a
Yeah.
rising star in Japanese female wrestling.
22 and 39 are both too young. So, yeah, our
Absolutely.
condolences to the families and friends of both these professional wrestlers. There's not really any good way to transition from the serious talk other than to now like break, and we'll go into
Let's
some news. Yeah.
let's just jump into our main event. Let's just jump into the main event because along with my drink, I needed something a little less heavy to get us going
Yeah.
again. And what
We
a
had that.
what event we had. AEW's Double or Nothing, and just like our review of Money in the Bank, which I thought professional wrestling from a major promotion could not get me any more insane or have me laughing or just smiling goofily as I did with with Money in the Bank. Well, AEW said, "I see you, Doug. I hear you, and well, to play along with the gambling theme, we're going to raise here and call you on it."
We this is AEW's first pay-per-view in the era of no audiences, so we were kind of curious if you watched our preview last week as to what concessions they would make to this new reality, having seen WWE now do a couple of these type of events. And for the most part, it was kind of the playbook they've been using for their TV product
True.
until we get to that main event. But why you say we start from the beginning, Doug, and then work our way up to the insanity that was that main event?
Let's start with the pre-show. We had the best friends, Chuck Taylor and Trent, versus Private Party, Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn. Am I saying that right?
I
Mark
think
Quinn?
so. I'm
Okay.
just impressed that you started using names instead of just best friends versus private party.
I got Wikipedia pulled up with all the names of everything. Don't be too impressed.
Well, this was we called this one. It was exactly like we thought it would go. Best friends have been given a lot of airtime as well as a lot of victories in 2020, whereas Private Party have, for all their talent, not really been featured as prominently recently. So it kind of went the way we thought it was going to go. Not really much to say about the match other than it filled its spot as it was supposed to as a pre-show match. It was fine, and best friends go over and then continue on what's probably going to be a title run at some point for them.
I certainly hope so. I think, and I think eventually, the Private Party will get there. I missed a lot of the pre-show. I was in the kitchen preparing some tasty adult beverages for the night, so I missed a lot of the pre-show. And I haven't went back and watched it. But I did want to touch on this because I know you were able to get through all the pre-show and see it all. A lot of outlets that I was watching like reviews on today were talking about how there were some not necessarily botches. Well, I guess some people actually called Private Party out on their botches, and but I think it was attributed to basically not because they're bad wrestlers, but because they're always evolving and they're really young, and the spots that they work on, whereas the Bucks are just like clockwork at this point. It looks like from what I'm seeing that Private Party, their spots evolve. You may have seen them do something on Friday night. Well, Saturday night they're going to do the same thing, but add something to it to kick it up a notch. And that muscle memory is not quite there for them yet. But I think what I did see of it, I really enjoyed. So
Yeah, not a perfect match. Probably, if you're giving it a grade, a B. Good, hard work by all four men involved, and the right team went over. It didn't stick around too long. Wasn't much of a backstory behind it, so that, storyline wise, that didn't have that to boost it either. So, there was a couple of blown spots, but as a pre-show match, it set up well for the first match of the pay-per-view, which was about a 40-minute contest. So yeah, once the curtain dropped on the pay-per-view, Doug, they went straight into that ladder match.
Straight into the ladder match. This was their
a casino ladder match where the winner is going to get the.
Oh no, you're froze. Oh, are you there? Technical difficulties. Oh no. One of us is froze. It's either me or Kevin. I'm not really sure. Maybe we can refresh the feed. And Kevin is gone from the stream. Well, what's up, everybody? I have lost Kevin. So, oh, there he is. There he is. All right.
Where'd I go?
Some technical difficulties there. I'm not sure what happened. Everything froze. So, I am not sure what was going on.
It appears that we're back.
So the magic of live, live streaming. There you go. It's going to happen. Just a little taste of what can happen when you're going live. But anyway,
that's a great transition, Doug, because last night they started the pay-per-view with a ladder match live where, a multi-person match like that can sometimes be a bit of a train wreck.
Indeed it can.
And, the participants were Orange Cassidy, Joey Janela, who was filling in for an injured Rey Fenix, Luchasaurus, Scorpio Sky, Frankie Kazarian, Kip Sabian, Darby Allin, and Colt Cabana with a wild card. And really, that's what this match was about, Doug.
It really was.
Get the wild card spot.
Really was about the wild card. And, for those that are not familiar with this match or the concept, what you have is a basic ladder match. Think Money in the Bank. If you're familiar with WWE's Money in the Bank, but also throw in the concept of the Royal Rumble, where you've got a participant. You start with two men in a ladder match with in this case, instead of a briefcase above them, there's a giant poker chip because it's a casino themed event. So you've got a giant poker chip, which will lead them to a future AEW championship match, world championship match. So every 2 minutes you're having a new participant enter. So you start out with two, but instead of, the 30 of a Royal Rumble, you've got 9 here. And as Kevin ran down the card just then, we know 8 of these people, and the wild card going in, we didn't really know. I assumed we'd get that last person on Dynamite on Wednesday, but they kind of kept that a surprise for us. So going into this show, I had 2 suspects for that wild card, and I actually hit one of them. So,
and because we didn't know who that wild card was going to be, he was not amongst the selections we had when we were making our picks. So we missed this one because the wild card was not only a huge free agent signing, but was the victor of this match. Doug, you want to talk a little bit about who's now on the AEW scene?
So former Impact champion Brian Cage, the man who is nothing but muscle from head to toe. The man has more muscles than half the AEW roster. I think he has muscles that, other humans just don't have. But, going into this, I told Kevin, since we don't know who it is, I can see either Drew Gulak showing up for maybe a one-off to collect a paycheck, since he is currently out of his WWE contract, but I do expect him to get back into the WWE, or Brian Cage, because I read earlier in the day that Cage had been out injured, but is a free agent because he's off Impact, but he'd been out injured rehabbing one of those many muscles that the man has, but that he was healed. So I was thinking it would be one of those two. My pick for this match, Darby Allin did not win. He had some interesting spots, some painful spots, some things that just make me shake my head and go, "Oh, this poor kid is not going to live to see 40 if he keeps wrestling like this."
And honestly, these multi-person matches are really they're never heavy on the psychology. They're not. They are a lot of ways about the spots. Like if you have a few, ouch, like that really hurt, Daredevil type spots. When you have that many participants, there's not going to be a back and forth. It's going to be guys disappearing for long periods of time so it's a bit of a spot fest. But it's really the way to judge these matches, in my opinion, is, how many memorable spots did they have? Did they not take any chances that were unnecessary? And while there were some painful spots, no one did anything so over the top that you thought that that was unwise. I do believe that your boy there had probably the spot of this match, the leap off the ladder through another ladder while on a skateboard. Probably
it was a Jeff Hardy. Yeah, Jeff Hardy with a skateboard moment is what Darby Allin did there. I mean, that just.
So really, I mean, a couple of guys got some good, moments. Luchasaurus had a couple of good moments where he looked, before Cage got in there as the big man with a bunch of these other smaller guys. Yeah. He got to look like a beast for a while. But really, coming out of it, the two things you're going to remember, or at least that I do, is that spot off the ladder. So kudos to Darby
Mhm.
for still in that spot, and then the surprise of Brian Cage, because I think it makes a statement. Particularly, I think you and I were discussing it at this moment in time when WWE has let go so much talent over the last few weeks.
Yes.
That AEW, though the current situation does not allow for touring or large audiences, they're making signings, and I think
Yes.
that Brian Cage is a great one. If you're not familiar with Impact, if you were a fan of Lucha Underground, you might remember Brian Cage from Lucha Underground. I think that's really where he started to get recognized as far as American TV audiences go. So obviously his profile's never been higher. And if you've not seen the dude, once you see him, you'll understand why he just looks like main event. And he can wrestle too. So I think it's a wonderful signing myself.
I agree. The guy can go, and let's just talk about the fact that they're putting him with Taz because he comes out with Taz. So
Mm,
I am going to see us. I see us getting a Darby Allin Brian Cage program soon because Taz has been trying to recruit Darby Allin so many times recently. So we're going to see that program, but. But back to that match, let's talk about all 8 other participants ganging up on Page to make him look like a complete beast, burying him underneath ladders and chairs and tables and one giant casino chip, only for him to emerge from it, just like Godzilla coming out of the water, later
yeah,
to,
that was a
to
great moment.
to come back and win that match. And also, what was it, Joey Janela, and was it Darby Allin and Joey Janela that do a spot onto that just pile of stuff that is on
Yes,
top of him?
with Cage still underneath it. Yes, the
Yes,
body flew and landed on, but the dude is, again, it's like swatting off a gnat for him. Like this dude has the dimensions of a action figure. So uh, when you see him, you will definitely make an impression. Immediately he comes in, he's got the chip now. And he's in the world title picture on night one, so that lets you know right there what they think of him.
yep,
I don't think they'd be making any signings right now. I mean, your Drew Gulaks, folks like that, I'm sure they probably have interest in, but I think that a lot of things, as in a lot of businesses, are probably going to wait until this eases, the pandemic does somewhat.
right,
This is one they obviously knew that they couldn't wait on, and
absolutely,
that's all again says a lot about what kind of talent they signed. This is a main event level guy that was been sitting on the shelf for a while, is not overly exposed to to the American audience in a way that it's just that guy that you see a lot. So I think that there's big things in his future. And I'm glad you mentioned Taz, because I love that AEW apparently, whereas WWE has a lot of their veterans, as either commissioners or backstage agents or things.
right,
You have Tully Blanchard with Sean Spears. You got Arn Anderson, who is working with Cody Rhodes as an advisor. Jake the Snake doing the same thing with
mhm,
Lance Archer. So AEW has definitely set up a pattern here of
yes,
taking guys from yesteryear that your wrestling fans will remember, guys who can talk, guys who can engage an audience, and putting them with this young talent to help get that younger talent over. It's a wonderful
absolutely.
combination.
It really is. But so Brian Cage went over. We both didn't call that one because,
Nope.
well, we didn't know Brian Cage was going to be in the casino ladder match. But right after
we,
that, we had MJF and Jungle Boy.
we both called that one right.
Jungle Jack Berry, that's true. MJF, went over in that singles match, and but it was really great because he just went over. Both of those guys came out looking like stars. They are looking like just like Darby Allin, I believe. These two guys are the future of AEW. Somebody had mentioned, you were looking at future AEW main eventers when we were watching that yesterday, and I have to agree with that because these two kids, are great. They're great together, and it wasn't a squash match where MJF comes in and just totally destroys Jungle Boy. It was a back and forth, and really at the end of the day, it was booked in a way that makes Jungle Boy look good because MJF won almost on a fluke with a roll up, like some sort of modified roll up where he was able to get a pin. It was, and then he doesn't do his celebrating afterwards or the trash talking. He rolls out of the ring because Jungle Boy has taken him to his limits. Jungle Boy's still laying in the ring. It was just a really great back and forth throughout where either one of them could have won at any point in the final minutes of the match.
2 months ago, this would have been a squash match on Dark. And that's not a slam on Jungle Boy, but through most of AEW's existence, when the Jurassic Express first came on the scene, Luchasaurus was already injured. So you had Marco Stunt, who is more of a comedy act, with Jungle Boy, who is undersized himself, not Marco Stunt undersized, but the two of them together basically became great fodder, guys that could really sell for much larger wrestlers.
Yes.
So Jungle Boy doesn't have the greatest of records, and MJF's not what is 10-1 or something like that. It hasn't lost this year, so on paper it should have been a squash match, but it says something about where they want to position Jungle Boy moving forward, that a talent like MJF, who we know is going to be a star, like you said, sold that much and gave that much in return to Jungle Boy. I think I can see a point in time where Jungle Boy breaks away from the Jurassic Express and maybe the comedy side of that angle, and has a light heavyweight style singles career on the main roster. But MJF, one of the best heels working today. Good match, a really good match between these two, and we picked that one right. But after that, we started getting into our title matches, Doug.
And the next one we picked, we both, we got this one wrong, with Cody going up against Lance Archer for the, these were the tournament finals for the AEW TNA Championship, which I know we were commenting about the way the belt looked when Mike Tyson came out with it.
I think you meant TNT championship there.
JR did it too.
Last night, JR called it the TNA title, and then commented that he was going to get fired. But
great, now I'm going to get fired.
I have no one to talk to, so I guess we'll keep you. But yes, TNT champion.
Okay, well, this is my reason for calling it TNA.
And maybe JR's reason as well. I don't know. He was having some moments last night.
Well, the whole commentary team was on fire last night. But anyway, the TNT championship bout, they did mention, because of the global pandemic, isn't actually finished, because we were both talking about how it looked, I don't know, just not that spectacular as far as their belt.
Looked a little plain, but apparently they still have some gold plating and things to go on.
Correct.
This match was the result of the tournament that's been airing. If you've been watching, Dynamite on Wednesday nights for the last month, it was down to Cody Rhodes and Lance Archer, who has come in as a beast, an unbeatable monster with Jake the Snake Roberts behind him. So if there was easy money on this card, MJF was definitely going to win over Jungle Boy, and Cody Rhodes was, as an executive, going to do the deed, and their monster Lance Archer was going to continue on his rampage. We got this one spectacularly wrong, Doug, and I know that spectacularly. I know it's all in the follow-up, but yeah, I don't know that I agree with the decision. I can't fault the match. The match itself was very solid. Good work by both men. Cody worked from underneath. The big man played the role of a big man. And, we got some Arn Anderson, Jake Roberts shenanigans in the mix as well for fans that were looking forward to seeing them get involved. They, of course, did. But, yeah, your first ever TNT champion, and what was the start of a pretty good night for the executive team.
It was definitely a pretty good night for the executive team. And let's not forget we had Mike Tyson there, which honestly was a bit of an afterthought, really. I mean, at one point the camera shoots over to Tyson and he's laid back in a chair ringside yawning.
We all know from his experience with wrestling back in the 90s, when he was a part of WrestleMania and the big angle that helped kick off the Stone Cold phenomena in a lot of ways. Tyson is legit a wrestling fan, was a huge Bruno Sammartino fan back in the day, growing up on this stuff. So I think they must have just picked the wrong time to call that angle to shoot Tyson there at ringside. Absolutely. I don't think he was actually bored.
That was a very poor time to cut to Tyson. I'm suspecting he had a lengthy travel day, maybe, or maybe a late night the night before. So I don't know, but his involvement was minimal, which I'm happy for. And it was a good match. I just don't know where they go with Archer here, because I'd said they've built this man. This is how you build a champion. This is how you build a credible threat. And then It took a couple of crossroads to take him down and for Cody to go over, but I'm
And
just
that's probably a thing that we should mention too, Doug. He didn't get pinned. He didn't submit. A couple of crossroads. He then put on a sleeper hold, which when was the last time we ever saw a sleeper hold win a wrestling match? So it really was a surprise finish in that regard. The match was, solid, not necessarily over the top spectacular, but no train wreck either. It was very entertaining. And then that ending was like, he's got a sleeper on and he just passes out.
wait.
So
Was that Moxley or Brody Lee, or was that did that happen here too? Didn't Cody get a clean pin?
I am mixing up my big man defeats.
What's your excuse?
You are correct. You are correct. Mental note is my excuse instead of actual notes. No, you're right. It was the second crossroads that finally took him out.
Right.
Which makes it even stranger, actually. No, I didn't mean to tip our hat on the reviews here, but actually that does make it stranger because there was a clean pin. Jake Roberts at that point had been tossed out, so it's not like there was for him and Arn, and that cost him the match. Something go wrong with the plan. It was a straight up 1, 2, 3. Which you're right. Where do they go with Archer? It seemed like he was destined to be with Moxley at some point in a main event program down the line. They're going to have to do some damage control on rebuilding his character if they, unless he's in the doghouse and we haven't heard yet. It was kind of a strange booking decision.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Oh, I mean, it is what it is at this point, and like you say, follow up is always key. But I'm not sure. That's one of those characters from. That's one of the things last night. I'm not sure where you go with that character now because you've built him as a beast, and then Cody does get his come up, but but.
Cody would have been fine. If Cody gone down for a defeat, Cody loses a lot. I mean, when it comes to big matches, he tends to do the job. So, yeah, Lance Archer had a lot more to gain from a victory. And so now I think there's more damage to him in a defeat. What do they do with him? Where do they go with him and Jake, as a tandem? I guess we'll start finding out the answers to that Wednesday.
Yeah, we shall see. And I do believe Tyson is also booked for this Wednesday, too. I think I saw that earlier on my Instagram feed from AEW that Tyson's going to be on hand this Wednesday. So maybe they're not done with Tyson either. Well, clearly they're not since it's going to be on Dynamite this week.
There might be a follow-up plan.
Maybe so. So next up, we had Chris Statlander versus Penelope Ford. This was not the original match as it was announced, but our dentist in residence at AEW, Britt Baker, received an injury Wednesday night and was unable to compete or unable to perform for this. And it sounds like it's a pretty nasty and legitimate injury, a broken bone leg thing. Although, in great HIPAA violations, the doctor also went on to talk about her and her attitude and how she's a poor patient in addition to her medical condition. But we didn't get Statlander versus Baker. We got Statlander versus Penelope Ford, which
I like both ladies.
Absolutely.
I mean, but because there was no backstory, there was no real chance for them to work a program. Statlander went over in a match that, because of where it was positioned, between two of the matches that had been heavily hyped, title contests and such. That match sort of was the come down match, popcorn match, if you will. Not a whole lot to it, to be honest.
True. Yeah, there wasn't. I mean, it was. It was a good match. Statlander went over, and I think we both had called that one for Baker. But
that Baker been in the contest, I think that's the way it's going to go. So good for Chris. That I guess if the silver lining is that Chris got a victory on pay-per-view that otherwise she was not going to get.
Yes. But moving on from that one, we had a match that was not announced when we did our preview show last week. We had a Dustin Rhodes versus Shawn Spears. This came very late in the week where Shawn Spears had actually just called out Dustin after his retirement or supposed retirement from going back to Lance Archer, where Lance Archer just totally destroyed him last month. And apparently it ended his career and put him into retirement. But Shawn Spears calls him out, decides to go into business for himself, book a match, comes out dressed in street clothes, not expecting Dustin to show up. And this turned into a comedy match. We're
It
in
was
quick
short.
order.
Yeah, and quick order, 5 minutes, and it was done. So it didn't overstay its welcome, but you could have dropped this from the card, and no one would have missed it. I like
Unless you're
both.
unless you're a big Sean Spears fan, because we did get a backside Sean Spears shot. So if you're into Sean Spears, watch it for that.
Yeah, good on Dustin for winning and still 38 years I think into a career.
Crazy.
Looking as he looks, performing as he can perform, but he didn't do that last night. There really wasn't the forum for it. Like I said, 5 minutes comedy match, but he went over, and maybe there's more to that, or maybe it was just a time filler, but it wasn't a time filler that was needed because this was a very long show.
This was a long show, especially coming off of WWE pay per view, which seemed like to last about 10 minutes. Money in the Bank did. I mean, I know it was longer than that, but it shot by in 2 hours. I think Double or Nothing, AEW's Double or Nothing, that was on last night, was close to 4 hours.
Clocked in
Which,
at 4. Yeah.
but coming out of that Rhodes Spears match, we had our Hikaru Shida, Nyla Rose for the AEW Women's Championship, which I am so glad
I
that
won't pat myself on the back.
I called this one wrong. I expected the native beast to hold on to that belt for quite a while. I think we've established what a Hikaru Shida fan I am. But so I've never been happier to be wrong that this girl is now our new AEW champion. I'm gonna just
It's
put the
all right.
drink. Put the drink over here till we finish the show.
This was a match. These women were extremely physical. They beat the crap out of each other.
Indeed.
Rose is a beast, so you expect that from her. But this was a no DQ, no countouts match, which, as we noted, and we haven't mentioned this yet, a lot of matches seem to be, even though they weren't booked that way, there was a lot of leniency from the officials last night as far as
Very, very, very lenient on the 10 count outside the ring. I imagine if we would have had more tag team matches, we would have seen a lot more action without tags too, because everything you're right, absolutely right. Everything seemed like a no DQ match because there were minutes upon minutes where people outside of the ring without a ref counting, with refs just trying to coax people back into the ring. It could have benefited from some, especially in the championship matches, at least some commentary from the about the referees from the commentary team saying how they don't want this to end in a DQ or a count out or something like that, and getting people back into the ring so we can have a legit win if there is one. But we didn't really get that.
Too much of that for my liking. So they probably need to tighten that up. Not do that for too many of the matches. This is one where that was stated in advance that part of the rules is that anything goes, and wherever they wanted to take it, they'll take it. And they primarily kept it around ringside, obviously not wanting to steal the thunder from what was coming in the main event. But for the space they had to work in, they utilized it. Fence, the fencing, they had some shots into the fencing. They used some of the props that were around the ringside as well. Ultimately, it was a Singapore cane that was the beginning of the undoing of the Native Beast. But it was quite a contest, and anytime that AEW switches a title, it's big news. So this is only the third women's champion in the history's promotion, and I'm really eager to see where they go with Shida from here, because
I am too. I think
there's a lot of great opportunities, matchups, I think, for her down the road as champion.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really thought they would. I really, really did think they would keep the belt on Nyla Rose longer. Just to, I said last week they shouldn't be playing hot potato with that belt, and they won't be. But what were we talking about? Nyla Rose has had it for 150 some days.
103, I think, is what it was, which is a long title reign. But I think where in WWE we see sometimes up to 3 shows a week, where 3 shows a week, but with Raw, SmackDown, now NXT, and then you throw a pay-per-view, sometimes you got 4 shows. I think that sometimes their champions, their reigns seem like they go much quicker because you see the wrestlers way more often.
That's true.
I think that it kind of took us both by surprise, even though I called it one way and you had called it the other. I don't think either of us thought that she'd already been champion for 103 days.
Right. Right.
I think the once a week schedule and where they only have the 2 hours, you don't see everybody every week. In WWE, you mainly see the main roster. You see repeatedly. I did not realize she had already been champion quite that long.
Neither did I, and I'm still unable to recall. Maybe other than maybe a Riho like rematch, how often she's defended that. I think it, but I don't know. But anyway,
New
it
champ.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at this point. She doesn't have it anymore. Sheeta has that belt, and I am so happy to be wrong about that.
And I'm happy to be right about anything. So,
So next up was our first of two main events for the night. We had John Moxley, the champion, going against Mr. Brody Lee of the Dark Order. And we
I
talked about
spoiled this one.
it's okay. You didn't give away who did what, but Mox. We'll go ahead and say Mox did go over in this, and as Kevin pointed out earlier, it did protect Brody Lee. That Brody Lee didn't submit, he didn't tap out, he wasn't pinned, he was choked out after another heavy back and forth and a insane spot where we saw Dirty Deeds. Wait, is it still called Dirty Deeds? No, it's Paradigm Shift now, where we saw the Paradigm Shift through the ramping.
Yeah. And in a way that looked legit, like for a second, like it was. That wasn't obviously rigged in the way that sometimes there's a table just happening to be sitting here. Someone's getting ready to go through it. That was one of those things that was a surprise when they went all the way through down to the floor. They also had a extremely physical contest. This was one match that introduced some color. When the big man came up bleeding, and like you said, I think it's worth noting. Since I did kind of get my matches confused earlier, I will go back and say that with the Lance Archer situation, where does he go from here? Because he's a beast who is undefeated and he goes down clean. In this instance, Brody Lee was actually protected in that he didn't give up. He looked tough and not giving up. He had a back and forth contest. He did not get pinned. And so there's many ways that he can rebound much easier than Archer probably could. But we both called it. There's really no need for a superstar. And truly, other than Chris Jericho, to your average wrestling fan, there's no one on the AEW roster that's going to be more known to a national audience if you're trying to pry eyes away than John Moxley, the former Dean Ambrose. So he is absolutely at this point in time the right man to be the head of and face of that company with the championship belt. So they made the right call, and they had a good match getting there.
Absolutely. This was a much better match than you would have found to get Dean Ambrose versus, I've forgotten his name, one of the Wyatt family. I've already forgotten who. Luke Harper, thank you. But to your casual wrestling fan, if they were to tune into this last night, they would have just a quick glance and they're like, okay, great, it's Dean Ambrose versus Luke Harper. I've seen Wyatt family versus Shield already. I've seen that already. You haven't seen it like this. You have not seen John Moxley versus Mr. Brody Lee because
Moxley is he's a violent man. You can't do that in WWE.
You really can't. And going back to that spot, if you haven't seen the pay-per-view, what AEW does is, at Daly's Place, they have the ring set up, and there's not like a traditional ramp. It's basically the performers will come out on stage left or stage right, one of the tunnels, and then come into, there's almost like a bridge that's built where they go straight into the ring. It's built parallel to the ring. And what you had last night was Moxley on the outside of the ring taking Brody Lee through that bridge that goes from like stage into the ring, just completely destroying that. And clearly it was gimmicked, but even with what it takes to gimmick that, that has got to take some force and some weight and just some oomph behind it. And just to think that those two guys, because again, you had performers going across this thing all night up to this point, and big dudes like Brian Cage, like Luchasaurus, and nobody was gingerly walking across it or going through it to avoid it because they knew it was gimmicked, but it was a great match. I really expected some Dark Order shenanigans, although I did expect I really expected Dark Order shenanigans, and especially once Brian Cage won that big giant poker chip, I thought, okay, here's how Moxley loses a championship, but is protected because he somehow defeats Brody Lee. Dark Order comes out as soon as he's defeated, takes him out, beats him down, and then Brian Cage comes through, cashes in the chip, and is your new AEW champion. None of that happened. None of
None of
that
that.
happened.
Nope. I guess saving it for another night
Saving
because
it.
there's plenty that still was to occur on this pay per view. Maybe that's why they didn't
Oh
want to overstuff
my
it.
goodness! It was, and next, if you watched the Money in the Bank ladder match, the Money in the Bank pay per view, and thought, how can big time professional wrestling get any more insane than them fighting through an entire office building to get to the top and throw people off a roof to win something? Well, you've never seen a stampede. What is it? The stadium stampede?
Stadium Stampede. And
Oh
this, yeah,
my goodness.
this is where it helps to be owned by the same guy that owns the Jacksonville Jaguars because they had this in the entire football stadium for the Jaguars to their to their disposal, and it's worth pointing out, I think, that this is the type of match that if you try to do it in a live setting with fans, they would hate it because they
Absolutely.
make good money, and then the main event comes, and half of what's going on, more than half of what's going on, is out of their sight. It would not be able. It is when we were wondering what happens after Money in the Bank and what WWE did. Well, AEW shows that as the other large company. I mean, if both large companies are doing these things for their main event, until we have fans back in arenas, you're going to see definitely more of the cinematic approach. This was obviously the only thing that was pre-filmed. And when you see it, if you didn't see it, you will know why it's pre-filmed. Again, you could not do a lot of this stuff
Could not.
in front of a live crowd. But yeah, Doug, where do you start? Do you start with a horse, or do you start?
Well, I think the best place to start is really the beginning, and to paint a picture for folks who haven't seen this yet, or are on the fence about maybe chasing this down. What you have is a very football themed event where you introduce all the players just like they are football players, coming through the steam and smoke, or what all the inner circle had inner circle jerseys with significant numbers attached to them. Like Jericho had his dad's, what is it, 27, that Irvine, what's his dad's name? Irvine.
Yeah, the hockey player.
Yeah, so 27's on Jericho, Sammy Guevara a 93 because that's the year he was born, so on and so on. And then you have the Young Bucks. You have
cheerleaders.
There were cheerleaders.
Even though they didn't focus on it, the inner circle also had a coach that we noticed
Yes,
was
on the sidelines
with the clipboard.
And so you have the Jacksonville Jaguars stadium empty except for an actual wrestling ring on the 50-yard line. There are cheerleaders, there's the smoke, the teams come out. Aubrey Edwards blows a whistle like there's a kickoff, and teams come from both sides of the field to meet in the middle and start in the melee. But the elite is missing Hangman. We have Matt Hardy come out with him. We have the Bucks. We have Kenny Omega, and Kenny Omega's just like brushing off, like, no, Hangman's not here, but it's cool. Don't worry about it. He's going to be here. And boy, did he show up.
Yep, the cowboy showed up as a cowboy should show up. And for the first time in wrestling history, to my knowledge, a horse was utilized as a weapon in a professional wrestling match.
So
not like a fake horse. No, an actual horse was chasing down poor Sammy. Sammy has done so much running. Obviously, Jericho is not going to agree to those spots. Sammy's the kid. They make him do all the running. He ran from a golf cart. He ran from Hangman on a horse who chased him down. Obviously, they had a lot of real estate with which to work. And really, this match, if it is, in fact, even, I mean, the main event, I don't know if it was a match because there was comedies. It was very much, if you did see the Money in the Bank and you liked the Money in the Bank, you would have liked this because it was a fight, not a wrestling match. And then when it wasn't a fight, it was comedy.
It was. I mean, because Hangman actually And spots because Hangman ends up chasing Sammy back into areas in the stadium, but Sammy somehow shakes him. So Hangman, frustrated that he can't find Sammy, finds a bar in the stadium, tells his horse to stay, just
Which
stay.
he does.
Which it's a good horse. The good
It's a
horse
good horse.
stay there through the rest of the match. And then Hangman heads to the bar. Well, there's this insane melee going on.
Of course, Jake Hager eventually finds him in the bar and then sits down to have a drink with him. I mean, that's the kind of like fight this was. And of course, then after the drink, and then they go back to punching each other. But some of the spots though are going to outlive any. It will be remembered for many things. Obviously, the horse will be one of them.
Yes.
I think another spot is they promised that the Bucks. I guess Matt was the one who did a moonsault off the goalposts of the stadium down onto the inner circle.
Mm.
Doug, the pool spot has to be.
The pool. So I saw a tweet from Matt Hardy earlier that said he had scoped out all of the pools and knew where all the pools were just in case. So he made sure they were filled with, I forgot what it's called, water from the Lake of Resurrection or whatever it is from the Hardy compound. And indeed it was. The pool spots were great because I guess there's a VIP section there at the stadium where there's, in addition to everything else, there's a pool. And Matt Hardy and Ortiz and Santana from the Inner Circle from Proud and Powerful end up in this pool fighting. They're ducking Matt Hardy down, and we start to see different incarnations of Matt Hardy. We start with the most recent broken Matt Hardy as Damascus, and then we go through multiple versions of Matt Hardy, including version 1.0 with Matt Fax, which the guys from Inner Circle.
Well, first, it should be pointed out, Ortiz cannot swim.
Oh, this is true. This is true.
He very tentatively got into the
3-foot pool.
3-foot pool. And so again, there was no attempt to try to make this a credible fight. It was, we're going to have these moments and then we're going to have this comedy. And if you love that sort of thing, you would have loved it. And this spot in particular, I think, may have been the highlight of the match from a comedy perspective.
Absolutely.
Because if you're an old school Matt Hardy fan, to watch him character by character, there's Team Extreme Matt Hardy. Every time they ducked him under the water to try to drown him and he came back up, he came back as a different version of himself. Again, pointing to the fact that this is the kind of thing you can do when you aren't doing a live wrestling match.
And just to point out, when Kevin says he comes back as like a new version, it's not just the acting. He is in a completely different costume, a completely different outfit, appropriate for the character he is then portraying. And then they will dunk him, and he comes back up in different clothing again, different character.
And I guess, after what was it, 30, 40 minutes? It was a long main event because there was so much going on.
Let me see. Wikipedia says it was actually 34 minutes.
Right on that there. So, I mean, what can I say other than I know that I kind of wasn't high on, well, I guess I wasn't high on the Money in the Bank match just because I'm like, it wasn't what I was expecting.
Right.
I thought it was going to be a fight. In some ways, that helped prepare me for this. And I don't know if it's just hey, if you can't beat them, join them. This was no better or worse as far as what they decided to do with the match. Maybe I was just conditioned instead of this wasn't what I was expecting to, this was exactly what I was expecting. That if you can't beat them, join them. I don't know that I would call it a wrestling match.
It was definitely not a wrestling match.
And, was it entertaining? You better believe it. Was it something that people will talk about forever, whether it's the horse, the flag on the play where there was a replay that was demanded by Jericho? I mean, I know there's so many spots we're missing.
So much.
We couldn't talk about it all. You definitely need to seek it out. Seeing it is going to be believing it, but it was entertaining from beginning to end.
Absolutely. And just to talk about the end, once again, we get the spot from Dynamite just a week or so back where we've got Matt Hardy and Kenny Omega in another golf cart chasing down Sammy. Sammy doesn't get hit this time. He heads into the stadium, into the bleachers. But, at this point, all the other Inner Circle have been incapacitated in some way, whether they've been trapped in giant freezers or tape the wheelchairs.
Yep. These things really happen.
um, but
Sammy left alone, though. He had already ran himself to death between running from the horse and running from the golf cart. So the dude was tired. So we were wrong, Doug. We
we
thought
were
there was going to be
wrong.
dissension. They didn't even hint at any dissension with Hangman.
Uh,
So either that's something they're going to breeze over and move on, or they're saving that for a later date, because last night it was cohesive. Again, good night for the executives, because the elite go over and they stand tall with the fireworks at the
yes,
football stadium at the end.
yes. To end what was an amazingly entertaining pay per view. I mean, again, I'm smiling like a little kid after the end of this pay per view. I'm not laughing as maniacally and as confused as I was after Money in the Bank, but maybe you're right. Maybe I'm a little bit more conditioned to this. I think the Stampede, the Stadium Stampede was better than Money in the Bank, but maybe it's because I'm conditioned to it. And I think we really have the godfather of this type of um, cinematic wrestling, there in AEW now, because I think without Broken Matt Hardy and all the work he did when he was in Impact with that character has led us to where we are today. And the this pandemic and the no audience era that we're in just because of the situation really lends itself greatly to this. But I don't know. I enjoyed it immensely. Seek this pay-per-view out if you can and watch.
And honestly, it's really Matt as well as the Bucks. The stuff that
Yeah,
they did with being being the elite.
this is true.
Um, you take those two strains of DNA, what Matt did pretty much on his own, and what the
Yes.
Bucks did on their own, and now because of necessity, the major companies in wrestling are taking that blueprint and just putting a lot more money and production values behind it. That gave you what the main event was last night. So if that's your thing, you will be in heaven. Check it out.
Indeed. So let's go ahead and head to our big finish, Kevin.
Yeah, so I'll do like I did last week. I think I like going with embarrassment first, just so we end on the positive instead of
I like
the
that.
sour
I like
negative.
that.
And I didn't have a ton negative, and like I said, I kind of went with it last night instead of hating on the fact that this isn't wrestling. I just went with that main event, so that's not it. Honestly, the only thing that was terribly embarrassing, I thought this week, and it wasn't even that bad, but I enjoyed the first skit with Street Profits and the Viking Raiders on Raw. There was actually enough comedy in 2 weeks ago when they were playing basketball against each other that I'm like, all right, that's kind of funny. This week it moved on to axe throwing, and I'm like, if this is going to be a weekly thing, this might be a little much. When I originally decided that maybe we should do an embarrassment of the week, what I meant by embarrassment is like that thing as a wrestling fans, if you have to always explain why you like the world of professional wrestling, it's sometimes hard for those who don't understand to understand, and that's what I meant by the embarrassment. If that's the person you're trying to convince, and they're in the room when something's going on, because we know when wrestling is good, it can be really good, but there is also so much of it, and when it can be bad, it lives up to all those stereotypes. My wife happened to be in come to the room when this thing was going on, and she was watching parts of it and watched enough of it to maybe get some context, and just looked at me and was like, I have no idea what in the world is going on here. It could not be explained. The axe throwing, and then the other, we had officers come, and one of them was kind of hot on one of the Viking Raiders and not the other. It just didn't really benefit anyone all the way around. It was one of those not so bad it's good kind of things. It was just so bad it just kind of got bad.
I hear you, brother. I hear you. So
Anything get you?
so I'm going to bring us down a little bit. I want to circle back around to Hannah and that whole situation. As wrestling fans, we tend to be, and I'm presuming this isn't all wrestling fans, since what apparently happened spawned from an incident on a reality TV show, but I'm sure that wrestling fans got involved in that as well. And as a community, we can be very, very vicious towards each other, especially online, like we are with this format and in our comments section. And it just, yeah, it embarrasses me that to be a wrestling fan when we can drive people with our words to end up in a situation where they feel hopeless, and for a 22-year-old who was raised in the business because her mother was also a wrestler. I read that this girl made her actual debut when she was 8 years old when she won a title, which her mother quickly pinned her and won. So she was a champion at 8 years old, even if it was just for a few minutes. But this wrestling was in this girl's blood, and it's just really heartbreaking to know that this community had any part in this girl, if she did take her own life, that had any part in that. And I did bring this up, and I just want to throw it out there for anybody who's in a bad situation. And there's always somebody to listen. And if you can't find anything else, there's this took me 2 seconds on a Google search to find this. Is cyberbullying is a real thing, and it's in every subculture. It's in this wrestling subculture and everything else. But let's all just take a minute as wrestling fans to come together, because we all love this for the same reasons. We may not all love all the characters or every single thing. And can be hypercritical of the product of many
And it's
different.
okay to be critical of the product.
Absolutely.
Behind the product are real men and women, and I think that particularly in our culture now, whether it's wrestlers or any form of entertainers, musicians, I mean, now we have access in a way we never did when you and I were first fans of this business or rock and roll or whatever.
Right.
You wrote a fan letter or something. I mean, now you have you can, tag them on Twitter and they see all of this. They're real people behind this. And some of them at 22 are still kids. And so I think Excalibur did a really nice thing last night too when talking about this. Just be kind. I mean, just we definitely need in our culture to take a moment to just think before we speak and remember that these are real people, and there's real consequences to just throwing so much negativity in the world. We need less of that.
I agree. But to bring it back up, I'm going to stick with my AEW crew and call my match of the week the Sheeta Nyla Rose, because that impressed beyond what I thought Sheeta was capable of, and Nyla Rose too. And it was just a really great match. It was not what I expected from start to finish, and I'm so happy that it wasn't what I expected. And it was a really great match. So my match of the week is going to those two girls.
I know that the main event was more memorable, I'm sure, to a lot of people, and I think that probably if you were giving things, again, a rating of stars or letter scores, you might rate the main event even higher. But that isn't a wrestling match to me on just a match of the night. And then match of the week, I'm with you, Doug. That's the same one for me, because sometimes what counts the match of the week is not just the work involved, but the story that's told.
Yes.
And then the story that was told in this was a championship, journey for Sheeta, conquering what seemed to be an unconquerable beast. So not only did they have a great execution of the match, it was the completion of a longer storyline that paid off at a pay-per-view, which is exactly where those types of journeys are supposed to end. So kudos to both ladies, and we are in agreement. That was the best match in professional wrestling this last week. Check it out if you haven't.
Oh, and an honorable mention going out just for professional wrestling, Carneyland. Oh my goodness, go watch NWA's Carneyland.
Again, if you talk about the Matt Hardy influence, there it is.
It is there. It is there. But with that, don't expect any wrestling, any wrestling matches. It is something very different that NWA is doing to fill a void, because just like everybody else, they're suffering a tough time right now getting through this pandemic, and they're creating entertainment for wrestling fans as well. But Carneyland definitely gets an honorable mention from me this week.
Well, my performance of the week is also not anything that happened in a ring. I want to do a shout out for my performance of the week being Dark Side of the Ring. For those who are not familiar, I think we talked about Dark Side maybe very early on in our run when we first started doing this show, when the Chris Benoit episode aired. But now that the whole season 2 is out there and just wrapped up, I thought I would give a shout out to the job that they did. Yeah. I know with a title like Dark Side of the Ring, it sounds like it maybe is tabloid or exploitive or what have you, but it is not. It is documentary style, and if you like that sort of thing about the wrestling product, it is not, endorsed by WWE or AEW or any of the major. It's its own independent, journalistically vetted approach to this, so you don't get Vince McMahon rewriting his history,
Right.
which sometimes you get with the WWE stuff. But from beginning to end, the Owen Hart story is just a tragedy of a family man who tragically died while performing an unnecessary stunt in the ring. And they told the story so well, but I thought it was a good time to shout out not just that most recent episode, but you start from the beginning of this year, or even last year when season one, Bruiser Brody or the Curse of the Von Erichs. I mean, they do delve on a lot of the negativity that's occurred through wrestling history. But if we've just been talking, there's negativity out there to discuss. But they get to the kind of the heart of this, and you really saw the heart of Owen. As well as that of his family and their perseverance in this most recent episode. So start from season one with the Bruiser Brody episode and work your
Yes.
way through both seasons of Dark Side of the Ring.
It is definitely excellent. Well, brother, I think it's time for us to wrap things up. You got anything else?
I'll say that if you're not subscribe, follow, join us next week at 8:00. I know, Doug, we've done Raw, SmackDown, AEW. Next week we're going to be discussing the Yellow and Black brand. So if you're a fan of NXT,
your house. Yep, I've got my represent tonight with my Champa shirt.
So there's your preview. Join us next week, folks.
All right, peace out, everybody. Stay safe.